Alex Volkanovski's head coach Joe Lopez has made one thing crystal clear. His team wants absolutely nothing to do with Jean Silva as a next opponent. Silva, who recently stated he would walk away from the UFC if he lost a potential title fight against Volk, has been positioning himself as the next featherweight contender. But that claim is raising plenty of eyebrows. Movsar Evloev is on a blistering 20-fight unbeaten streak and sits second only to Islam Makhachev for the longest active win streak in the entire UFC. Lopez made clear that in his view, Aljamain Sterling has a far stronger case for a title shot than Silva does right now. Silva's resume took a hit after a knockout loss prior to his recent win over Arnold Allen, and Lopez is not willing to let him skip the line. The comments have ignited a division-wide debate, with a large portion of fans backing Evloev as the rightful #1 contender after his win over Murphy. Volkanovski's team is firmly pushing for a more battle-tested opponent, either Evloev or Aljamain Sterling, and has no interest in entertaining the idea of a Silva fight.
It's just insane. Alex is the champion. Usually it's the other way around. And he's out here in press conferences and post-fight being like, give me the hardest guy. I just want Movsar. Movsar is the right fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and look, I think, you know, he's the deserving one, and you know, there's a lot of, you know, like that Jon Silva or whatever his name is, making, you know, barking like the little dog that he is in the background, you know, trying to make a lot of noise to make himself think he's, you know, he's the next one, but he's not deserving. You know, there's still Aljo, and yeah. There's guys above him, you know. He's got to earn his spot, you know. Don't think because you make a lot of noise you're going to get it, because you're not.
Jon Anik has dropped some major news that has the MMA world buzzing. The longtime UFC commentator recently revealed that Ian Garry appears to be the frontrunner for the next welterweight title shot against Islam Makhachev. Despite Michael Morales carrying an undefeated record and delivering a sensational knockout over Sean Brady, Anik made the case that the decision should come down to meritocracy and overall body of work, and in his eyes, Garry edges it out. If this matchup gets made, we're looking at Dagestan versus Ireland Part 2, the same Islam Makhachev who once mockingly dubbed Garry the AliExpress version of a contender. Stylistically, it's a fascinating contrast. Garry is a sharp, movement-based striker who has quietly improved his grappling significantly, which could make him far more competitive against Islam's elite wrestling and cage control than many expect.
So sometimes I just throw my hands up and wonder what exactly is the internal promotional metric or the driving force that would give Ian Garry this title shot as opposed to, say, Michael Morales. Is it a matchup thing? Do they maybe make more money if one guy's the champion? I don't exactly know the extent to which Ian Garry moves needles versus Michael Morales, but I think straight meritocracy based on the body of work, despite the Ecuadorian Morales' undefeated record and the wildly sensational win over Sean Brady. I think based upon the body of work for Garry, his willingness to step up all the time, even in the protest main event in Kansas City, I just feel like Makhachev versus Garry is the fight. And I think it's a fascinating stylistic matchup as well. I think Morales eventually is going to get there. Looks like an absolute world beater, but depending on what sort of their internal methodology is, I think Garry is going to be the guy, and I think he's the most deserving.
A wild story has emerged involving Khamzat Chimaev. His close friend and former UFC fighter Albert Duraev has gone on record describing a tense incident that went down just days ago. Speaking to Russian outlet MMA Brotherhood, Duraev claims that while the two were out shopping in Washington, D.C., they were suddenly surrounded by a group of men, some of whom were reportedly connected to Israel Adesanya. Izzy, of course, was in town preparing to fight Joe Pyfer that same evening. This is far from the first time Chimaev has found himself tangled up in pre-fight complications, something that has given the UFC headaches in the past. Even though Khamzat has assured fans those days are behind him since claiming the middleweight title, skepticism remains high. In fact, a significant number of fans say they won't truly believe the Chimaev versus Sean Strickland fight is happening until he steps on the scale on fight week without incident. For now, Chimaev is splitting his training time between Abu Dhabi and the United States, where his camp with Coach Kavita continues as he prepares for the title defense.
It was a regular day. We just went out to check out some stores, and because Khamzat is popular, we are used to seeing fans follow him and ask pictures when he walks around all the time. But this was different. As fans noticed him and approached us, it seemed that some other people who were looking for Khamzat were also able to spot him. And suddenly, the behavior of the crowd changed. There were about 10 guys that were screaming things at him like, Izzy will smash you, this is the message, and stuff like that. Some of them tried throwing bottles as well. Mall security kept them away, and we then entered a store to wait for a car to get us out. Khamzat believes Izzy may have paid some of them to provoke him and push him into calling him out over his past mocking comments.
Dana White has officially left the door wide open for a Nate Diaz return to the UFC, and it all hinges on what happens when Nate steps into the ring against Mike Perry on the MVP Netflix card. In a recent interview, Dana made it clear that Nate signing with MVP doesn't mean the relationship with the UFC is over. According to Dana, the offer Nate received was simply too good to walk away from, and the UFC fully understands that. The door, he says, is still open. This comes after Joe Rogan revealed on his podcast that Nate is reportedly pulling in over $10 million for the Perry fight on Netflix. Rogan called the number absolutely insane, using it as a stark illustration of how much more fighters can potentially earn outside the UFC compared to what's on offer inside the octagon, a talking point that hits right at the heart of the ongoing fighter pay debate. Dana's comments leave the possibility of Nate's UFC return very much alive, potentially later this year or heading into 2027, depending on his performance and how negotiations play out. Stylistically, the Perry matchup is a dream clash for both men. Nate gets to use his length and output while Perry gets to walk forward and throw bombs. Given how durable both fighters are, this one could easily go the distance and deliver a hell of a show.
What was your reaction when you found out that he'd signed to the MVP to fight on that card?
Nate signed to fight under the Gina Carano Ronda fight. Have you had a conversation with him about bringing him back to the UFC before that all thing happened?
Yeah, he came in and met with me a couple weeks ago. We had a good time, and I think Nate just got an offer he couldn't refuse. I haven't talked to him since then, but yeah, no, I'm happy for him.
Does that now rule out him coming back to the UFC now that he's done that?
Is he coming back?
Is that an issue for him to then come back to the UFC after that?
I don't know. I mean, let him do his thing, and then let's see how the fight plays out, and and we'll see what happens.
UFC fans, which card are you watching on May 16th? Are you locking in with the UFC for Allen versus Costa, or flipping over to Netflix to catch the OGs, Ronda Rousey, Francis Ngannou, and Nate Diaz all on the same night? Drop your answer in the comments below. That's it from MMA Time. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for daily MMA updates.